To undertake this step of the course, I require you to read and practice A Course in Miracles for at least 14 days. It was written and edited by US psychologist Elaine Schuckman with the aid of a professional colleague by the name of William Thetford, and contains a study curriculum to bring about spiritual transformation. It comprises 3 sections: text, workbook, and manual for teachers, written from 1965 to 1972. I'm not affiliated to its writers, editors, or copyright holder, and receive no commission for requiring you to study it. My only purpose in doing that is to encourage you to follow a comparable pathway to your spiritual growth and development as the one I followed in education, in training, in the method of the Company Surveyor Society, set up by William the Conqueror of England. I practiced it for 19 days, and the effect was amazing. I received initial education and training in this field from my mother's maternal grandfather, Grandpa, my eldest surviving relative at the time of my birth, and with whom I lived with my parents from 3.5 days old to 3.5 years old. We were all under what was called house arrest, as they were conscientious objectors to the UK being at war with Germany on the grounds of their religious beliefs against killing people. I was born some 6 months before the end of World War II, so was brought up in the period of wartime rationing, so our educational resources were limited. But my parents studied by day and evening classes of their church to become missionaries, and I was raised to help them develop their missions. I was educated and trained in real estate governance, architecture, town and country planning and development, and in civil, municipal, structural and utilities engineering, and I qualified in the Squire of the Royal Division at 15.5. My mother's maternal grandfather was deaf, dumb, autistic, feral, shamanic, and ecumenical. I believe he was classed as a Welsh neo-druid for no better reason than he associated with a well-known Welsh neo-druid in his younger days, but to me he was unique, and you could never really tell with him what he was. My parents were born-again Christians of the Apostolic Church, which saw its origins in the early Holy Roman Catholic Empire. Consequently, my upbringing was so ecumenical that I am not affiliated to any church, nor any religion as such. That said, I believe in the holiness of the Christian Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. However, I also believe in the holiness of ancient Greek gods, Zeus as the ruler of all the Olympic gods, Gaia, mother goddess of the earth, and Hermes, the messenger of the gods to the people of earth. Having laid my religious cards face up on the table, let us take a taster of the Course in Miracles. On my retirement in 2010, I revised everything I knew about the great world religions and found A Course in Miracles came closest to what my mother's maternal shamanic grandfather taught me about miracles. I was amazed at this, as it claims it was channeled by a singularly iconic, non-pagan religious character. But having studied and practiced Chopra's sutra exercises for 90 days before coming to it, I shelved that in anxiety, dived into the workbook, and in 14 to 15 days, it did not bother me who channeled it, because it had started working extraordinary miracles for me. So, to save you having to download it straight away and suffer the initial anxiety I suffered, what follows for the remainder of this step is the first 10 lessons. You can then decide if you want to download, read, study and practice the whole course, or just 90 days as I did, or just the first 15 lessons, or whatever. Lesson 1 is entitled, Nothing I See Means Anything. Now look slowly around you and practice applying this idea very specifically to whatever you see. This table does not mean anything. This chair does not mean anything. This hand does not mean anything. This foot does not mean anything. This pen does not mean anything. Then look farther away from your immediate area and apply the idea to a wider range. That door does not mean anything. That body does not mean anything. That lamp does not mean anything. That sign on the wall does not mean anything. That shadow does not mean anything. Notice that these statements are not arranged in any order and make no allowance for differences in the kinds of things to which they are applied. That is the purpose of this exercise. The statement is merely applied to anything you see. As you practice applying the idea for the day, use it totally indiscriminately. Do not attempt to apply it to everything you see, for these exercises should not become ritualistic. Only be sure that nothing you see is specifically excluded. One thing is like another as far as the application of this idea is concerned. We then come to lesson 2, and its title is, I have given everything I see all the meaning that it has for me. The exercises with this idea are the same as those for the first one. Begin with the things that are near you, and they apply the idea to whatever your glance rests on. Then increase the range outward. Turn your head so that you include whatever is to either side. If possible, turn round and apply the idea to what is behind you. Remain as indiscriminate as possible in selecting subjects for this application. Do not concentrate on anything in particular, and do not attempt to include everything in your area, or you will introduce strain. Merely glance easily and fairly quickly around you. Try to avoid selection by size, brightness, colour, material, or relative importance to you. Take the subjects simply as you see them. Try to apply the exercise with equal ease to a body or a button, a fly or a flow, an arm or an apple. The sole criteria for applying the idea to anything is merely that your eyes have alighted on it. Make no attempt to include anything particular, but be sure that nothing is specifically excluded. Apply this idea in the same way as the previous ones, without making distinctions of any kind. Whatever you see becomes a proper subject for applying the idea. Be sure that you do not question the suitability of anything for the application of the idea. These are not exercises in judgment. Anything is suitable if you see it. Some of the things you see may have emotionally charged meaning for you. Try to lay such feelings aside and merely use these things exactly as you would anything else. The point of the exercise is to help you clear your mind of all past associations to see things exactly as they appear to you now, and to realize how little you really understand about them. It is therefore essential that you keep a perfectly open mind, unhampered by judgment, in selecting the things to which the idea for the day is to be applied. For this purpose, one thing is like another, equally suitable and therefore equally useful. Lesson 4. These thoughts do not mean anything. Unlike the preceding ones, these exercises do not begin with the idea for the day. In these practice periods, begin with noting the thoughts that are crossing your mind for about a minute. Then apply the idea to them. If you are already aware of unhappy thoughts, use them as subjects for the idea. Do not, however, select only the thoughts you think are bad. You will find, if you train yourself to look at your thoughts, that they represent such a mixture that, in a sense, none of them can be called good or bad. This is why they do not mean anything. In selecting the subjects for the application of today's idea, the usual specificity is required. Do not be afraid to use good thoughts as well as bad. None of them represents your real thoughts, which are being covered up by them. The good ones, of which you are aware, are but shadows of what lies beyond, and shadows make sight difficult. The bad ones are blocks to sight and make seeing impossible. You do not want either. This is a major exercise and will be repeated from time to time in somewhat different form. The aim here is to train you in the first steps towards the goal of separating the meaningless from the meaningful. It is a first attempt in the long-range purpose of learning to see the meaningless as outside you and the meaningful within. It is also about, at the beginning of the training, your mind to recognize what is the same and what is different. In using your thoughts for application of the idea for today, identify each thought by the central figure or event it contains. For example, this thought about so-and-so does not mean anything. It is like the things I see in this room, or whatever else you want. You can also use the idea for a particular thought which you recognize as harmful. This practice is useful, but is not a substitute for the more random procedures to be followed by the exercise. Do not, however, examine your mind for more than a minute or so. You are too inexperienced as yet to avoid a tendency to become pointlessly preoccupied. Further, since these exercises are the first of their kind, you may find the suspension of judgment in connecting with thoughts particularly difficult. Do not repeat these exercises more than 3 or 4 times during the day. We will return to them later. Lesson 5. The title of this one is I am never upset for the reason I think. This idea, like the preceding one, can be used with any person, situation or event you think is causing you pain. Apply it specifically to whatever you believe is the cause of your upset, using the description of the feeling in whatever term seems accurate to you. The upset may seem to be fear, worry, depression, anxiety, anger, hatred, jealousy, or any number of forms, all of which will be perceived as different. This is not true, however, until you learn that form does not matter. Each form becomes a proper subject for the exercises for the day. Applying the same idea to each of them separately is the first step in ultimately recognizing they are all the same. When using the idea for today, for a specific perceived cause of an upset in any form, use both the name of the form in which you see the upset and the cause which you ascribe to it. For example, I am not angry for the reason I think. I am not afraid for the reason I think. But again, this should not be substitute for practice periods in which you first search your mind for sources of upset in which you believe and forms of upset which you think result. In these exercises, more than in the preceding ones, you might find it hard to be indiscriminate and to avoid giving greater weight to some subjects than to others. It might help to precede the exercises with a statement: there are no small upsets. They are all equally disturbing to my peace of mind. Then examine your mind for whatever is distressing, regardless of how much or how little you think it is doing so. You may also find yourself less willing to apply today's idea to some perceived sources of upset than to others. If this occurs, think first of this: I cannot keep this form of upset and let the others go. For the purposes of these exercises, then, I will regard them all as the same. Then search your mind for no more than a minute or so and try to identify a number of different forms of upset that are disturbing you, regardless of the relative importance you may give them. Apply the idea for today to each of them, using the name of both the source of the upset as you perceive it and of the feelings as you experience. Further examples are: I am not worried about so-and-so for the reason I think. I am not depressed about so-and-so for the reason I think. 3 or 4 times during the day is enough. And then lesson 6, the heading is: I am upset because I see something that is not there. The exercises with this idea are very similar to the preceding ones. Again, it is necessary to name both the form of upset, anger, fear, worry, depression, and so on, and the perceived source very specifically for any application of the idea. For example, I am angry at so-and-so because I see something that is not there. I am worried about so-and-so because I see something that is not there. Today's idea is useful for application to anything that seems to upset you and can profitably be used throughout the day for that purpose. However, the 3 or 4 practice periods which are required should be preceded by a minute or so of mind searching as before, and the application of the idea to each upsetting thought uncovered in the search. Again, if you resist applying the idea to some upsetting thoughts more than to others, remind yourself of the 2 cautions stated in the previous lesson. There are no small upsets. They are all equally disturbing to my peace of mind, and I cannot keep this form of upset and let the others go. For the purposes of these exercises, then, I will regard them all as the same. Okay, now we come up to lesson 7. I see only the past. This idea is particularly difficult to believe at first. It is the rationale for all of the preceding ones. It is the reason why nothing that you see means anything. It is the reason why you have given everything you see all the meaning that it has for you. It is the reason why you do not understand anything you see. It is the reason why your thoughts do not mean anything, and why they are like the things you see. It is the reason why you are never upset, for the reason you think, and it is the reason why you are upset, because you see something that is not there. Old ideas about time are very difficult to change, because everything you believe is rooted in time and depends on you not learning these new ideas about it. Yet that is it precisely why you need new ideas about time. This first time idea is not really so strange as it may sound at first. Look at a cup, for example. And use your cup, or are you merely reviewing your past experiences of picking up a cup, being thirsty, drinking from a cup, feeling the rim of the cup against your lips, having breakfast and so on? Are not your aesthetic reactions to the cup too based on past experiences? How else would you know whether or not this kind of cup will break if you drop it? What do you know about this cup except what you learned in the past? You would have no idea what this cup is, except for your past learning. Do you then really see it? Look about you. This is equally true of whatever you look at. Acknowledge this by applying the idea for today indiscriminately to whatever catches your eye. For example, I only see the past in this pencil. I see only the past in this shoe. I see only the past in this hand. I see only the past in this body. I see only the past in this face. Do not linger over any one thing in particular, but remember to omit nothing specifically. A glance briefly at each subject and then move on to the next. Lesson 8 follows on from Lesson 7. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. This idea is, of course, the reason why you see only the past. No one really sees anything. He sees only his thoughts projected outwards. The misconception about time from which your seeing suffers. Your mind cannot grasp the present, which is the only time there is. It therefore cannot understand time and cannot, in fact, understand anything. The only wholly true thought one can hold about the past is that it's not there. To think about it at all is therefore to think about delusions. Very few minds have realized what is actually entailed in picturing the past or in anticipating the future. The mind is actually blank when it does this, because it is not really thinking about anything. The purpose for the exercises for today is to begin to train your mind to recognize when it is not really thinking at all. While thoughtless ideas preoccupy your mind, the truth is blocked. Recognizing that your mind has been merely blank rather than believing that it is filled with real ideas is the first step to opening the way to vision. The exercises for today should be done with eyes closed. This is because you actually cannot see anything, and it is easier to recognize that no matter how vividly you may picture a thought, you're not seeing anything. With as little investment as possible, search your mind for the usual minute or so, merely noting the thoughts you find there. Name each one by the central figure or theme it contains and pass on to the next. Introduce the practice period by saying, I seem to be thinking about so-and-so. Then name each of your thoughts specifically. For example, I seem to be thinking about, name the person, about name of object, about name of emotion, and so on, concluding at the end of the mind searching period with, but my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Right? This can be done 4 or 5 times during the day, unless you find it irritates you. If you find it trying, 3 or 4 times is sufficient. You might find it helpful, however, to include your irritation or any emotion which the idea may induce in the mind searching itself. This idea obviously follows from the 2 previous ones, but while you may be able to accept it intellectually, it is unlikely that it will mean anything to you as yet. However, understanding is not necessary at this point. In fact, the recognition that you do not understand is a prerequisite for undoing the false ideas. These exercises are concerned with practice, not with understanding. You do not need practice of what you really understand. It would indeed be circular to aim at understanding and assume that you have it already. It is difficult for the untrained mind to believe what seems to be pictured before it is not there. This idea can be quite disturbing and may meet with active resistance in any number of forms, yet that does not preclude applying it. No more than that is required for these or any other exercises. Each little step will clear a little of the darkness away, and understanding will finally come to lighten every corner of your mind which has been cleared of the debris that darkens it. These exercises, for which 3 or 4 practice periods are sufficient, involve looking about you and applying the idea for the day to whatever you see, remembering the need for its indiscriminate application and the essential rule of excluding nothing. It is emphasized again that while complete inclusion should not be attempted, specific inclusion must be avoided. Be sure you are honest in making this distinction. You may be tempted to obscure it. For example, I do not see this typewriter as it is now. I do not see this key as it is now. I do not see this telephone as it is now. Begin with things that are nearest you and then extend the range. I do not see that coat rack as it is now. I do not see that face as it is now. I do not see that door as it is now. This idea, we now come on to lesson 10, which is the last of the lessons that I'm including in this set of slides. And its title is, My Thoughts Do Not Mean Anything. And I've come this far because this is where it becomes profound. This idea applies to all the thoughts of which you are aware, or become aware in the practice periods. The reason the idea is applicable to all of them is that they are not your real thoughts. We have made this distinction before and will again. You have no basis for comparison as yet. When you do, you will have no doubt that what you once believed were your thoughts did not mean anything. This is the second time we have used this kind of idea. The form is only slightly different. This time the idea is introduced with, my thoughts instead of these thoughts, and no link is made overtly with the things around you. The emphasis is now on the lack of reality of what you think you think. This aspect of the correction process began with the idea that the thoughts of which you are aware are meaningless, outside rather than within, and then stress their past rather than their present status. Now we are emphasizing that the presence of these thoughts means that you are not thinking. This is merely another way of repeating your earlier statement that your mind is really a blank. To recognize this is to recognize nothingness when you think you see it. As such, it is a prerequisite for vision. Close your eyes for these exercises and introduce them by repeating the idea for today quite slowly to yourself. Then add, this idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. The exercises consist as before in searching your mind for all the thoughts which are available to you without selection or judgment. Try to avoid classification of any kind. In fact, if you find it helpful to do so, you might imagine that you were watching an already assorted procession going by, which has little, if any, personal meaning to you. As each one crosses your mind, say, this thought about so-and-so does not mean anything. That thought about so-and-so does not mean anything. Today's idea can obviously serve for any thought that distresses you at any time. Remember that. In addition, 5 practice periods are recommended, each involving no more than a minute or so of mind searching. It is not recommended that this time period be extended, and it should be reduced to half a minute or even less if you experience discomfort. Remember, however, to repeat the idea slowly before applying it specifically, and also to add, this idea will help me to release me from all that I now believe. Thank you very much. I'll see you again at step number 6. Bye-bye.